Should we use vintage lenses? I think the movie Dune Part 2 clearly answers this question. So in this episode, I want to share with you my experience with vintage lenses after a year of using them, showcase the results I was able to achieve, and point out some pros and cons. Hopefully this information will help you decide if it's worth for you to invest your money and time in vintage lenses and why they are important. My interest in vintage lenses started last year when I decided to try out an old Vivitar lens that had been sitting on my shelf as decoration for years, and the results were great. And that's how I got myself into the rabbit hole of vintage lenses. To this day, I've tested around 20 different vintage lenses and built 3 sets of Carl Zeiss Jena, Contax Zeiss and Canon FD. You can find the reviews of them in the description. So why do we need vintage lenses in the first place, when we have so many good photography ones that are sharp and have fast autofocus? If you can just put a diffusion filter and call it cinematic. Well, diffusion filters are great, but they have downsides as well. And photography lenses are great for photography, but just too sharp for filmmaking. That's why there are cinema lenses that have no autofocus, lots of character, and softer, producing gorgeous images that we see in our favorite movies. But there is a little problem: their price. They are extremely expensive. For Hollywood movies, it's nothing because they can rent or purchase any kind of equipment they need for the project. But what about us, people who want to create our own art? Luckily for us, there are lenses like Disio Vespids, Athena Primes, Mikeys, and some other ones. I've seen a lot of reviews and seems like they produce good quality image, and I would love to try them in the future, because right now it doesn't make sense to me to spend over $1,000 per lens. Don't get me wrong, it's a good investment that will last you for a long time, but right now my goal is to try out as many different lenses as possible and experiment with different focal length. And for $1,000 I can easily build a set of 3 or 5 good quality vintage lenses. Of course, they will not be as practical and feel very much outdated, but I believe it's a good starting point into the lens world of filmmaking. I want to mention one Instagram page that has been extremely useful to me. It's called Lens Addiction. They post clips and lenses that were used to film it. It's a great resource when it comes to researching lenses. You can get a good idea of how different lenses render their own colors and produce unique look. I started my journey into vintage lenses with my Fujifilm X-H2S by buying 3 lenses: Tokina, Vivitar, and Helios. Each of these lenses produce their own unique character, which was new to me coming from photo lenses which pretty much have no character at all. Plus to that, vintage lenses render their colors differently, which means one lens can have more magenta and the other more green or blue. It's a great practice to train your eyes to see the differences and of course try to match them in post. Later on, I decided to stick to one brand and build a set of Carl Zeiss Jena lenses: 20mm, 35, 50, and 135. 3 of them I bought from Europe and 20mm I found locally. My Jena lenses had M42 mount, which makes it super easy to adapt to almost any camera. Carl Zeiss Jena lenses are known for the character they produce, and I absolutely loved using them. The only disadvantage for me is the build quality. I just wish it was more like Contax Zeiss. I got some Contax Zeiss lenses thanks to the recommendations of some good people. Had 25, 50 and 35 to 70mm zoom. From the start I was impressed with the build and image quality they produce. They don't have that much character as Jena, but produce more neutral colors with high contrast, which looks beautiful to my eyes. They have Contax Yashica mount that's pretty easy to adapt, and overall Contax Zeiss lenses are great, also considered to be optically close to the famous Zeiss super speed cinema lenses that were used in so many movies. The next set of lenses I was excited to try was Canon FD. I've known about them for a long time and I was surprised to find out that a lot of them are affordable, but later on it turned out that not all Canon FD lenses are color consistent like Carl Zeiss Jena and Contax Zeiss lenses. And after doing some research, I built a set of 28, 50 and 35 to 105mm zoom. And I have to say, I really like them. They have pretty good build quality and the image they produce looks so nice and little dreamy. Most of the vintage lenses are super easy to adapt to mirrorless or cinema cameras. There are so many adapters out there, some are affordable and some are expensive. Old lenses produce so much character and unique look, and that's why people started rehousing them to be able to use on the professional sets to film movies, TV shows, music videos, and other creative projects. Vintage lenses are light and compact, at least most of them. And that can be a good thing because you can take more of them with you, but can bring limitations if you want to use a matte box and follow focus. But of course, there are ways around it. For some people, manual focus is a downside. Personally, I quite enjoy it. You can be more precise this way. Of course, it takes some practice, but it's an important skill to have. Affordability is probably the best part about vintage lenses. The image quality you get from the old lenses is truly amazing. As we know, cinema lenses are very expensive, and vintage lenses can be a great option for people who want to experiment and get creative without spending a fortune. Now, let's discuss the downsides of vintage lenses. There are so many brands and different models, and in my experience, you would need to spend a good amount of time of researching, deciding the ones you want to buy, and actually finding them in good working condition. As much as I love old glass, it's not perfect by all means. Sometimes the optics is just not good. It can be soft, producing not enough contrast, create weird distortion, flares, and of course chromatic aberrations. Some less, some more. Even the copies of the same lens can have and produce slightly different image because of its condition and the fact that they were built in different factories and different years of production. The part that I don't like the most about vintage lenses is of course their common problems. And to name a few would be the dust inside the lens, inside the elements to be specific, stuck aperture and also oily aperture, stiff focus, and of course the worst is the fungus. I've experienced all of this issue during my exploration of vintage lenses. The dust is the easiest issue because sometimes it doesn't even affect the image quality. Oily and stuck aperture as well as stiff focus is more complicated because you would need a special tools if you need to do a servicing yourself, or you can also take it to the repair shop. Now the fungus. The fungus, as I mentioned, is the worst because it could definitely damage the glass. It grows inside the lens if the lens is stored in humid environment or exposed to the moisture. That's as far as I know. The two Canon FD lenses that I purchased are a great example of these issues. 24 to 35mm zoom. When I purchased the lens, the images and the description indicated that the lens is in perfect condition. However, when I received the lens and inspected it, I discovered a pretty nasty fungus inside, so I had to send it back. I came across Canon FD 17mm f4 SSC, which was pretty expensive for my budget, but this specific one was listed for half the price, and of course it had issues. Dust inside, stiff focus, and small amount of fungus. Well, I had no experience in lens servicing and cleaning prior to that, but I was excited to try it, so after watching some detailed tutorials, I purchased that lens, some tools, and here's how it went. The lens itself has so many parts, and I think we don't appreciate lenses enough and people who make lenses for us. The tricky part is to put this lens in working order and do it the right way. So let's hope I can do it. Well, long story short, 17mm turned out to have a completely different internal design than I expected. I spent a good amount of time trying to put it together and figure out how all these pieces work together, and I eventually did. And when I put it together, I realized there was a tiny piece of dust between the rear elements, so I had to disassemble part of it, and in the process I lost a tiny pin which turned out to be very important. So now I had to take it to the repair shop. But the good thing is I was able to clean the glass, lubricated the focus mechanism, got rid of the dirt that was there for years, and of course I removed the fungus. And I'm pretty happy that I was able to do that. Overall, lens servicing is not hard. It takes precision, patience, and of course, some time if you never done it before. As you can see, vintage lenses are not perfect, and you can experience all kinds of issues with them due to their age. Most of them are 40-50 years old, same as classic vintage cars. They'll look nice, but you cannot expect much performance from them. But if you restore a vintage car to its original glory and maybe make some improvements, it's gonna perform so much better. And that's why a lot of vintage lenses are being rehoused right now, basically taking them apart and putting the old glass into the new cinema-style lens body to use them on Hollywood sets, creating amazing movies. Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead was shot on a vintage Canon f0.95 rangefinder lens from 1960s. The lens was fully rehoused for using with the cinema camera, providing a soft look and extreme depth of field, which looks very interesting. The mind-blowing movie Dune Part 2 was partly shot on a rehoused Soviet lenses by Iron Glass Company. If you never heard about them, they are located in Ukraine and specialized in rehousing Soviet lenses as well as Carl Zeiss Jenas. If you want to check them out, the link will be in the description. Just when I thought about taking a break from experimenting with vintage lenses, I watched Dune Part 2 in IMAX, and that was the best movie I watched in recent years. When I came home, I couldn't stop thinking about lenses. The image looks so beautiful, the colors are so pleasing and natural. We know they used rehoused Mir 1 37mm, Helios 44 or 44-2 58mm, and Jupiter 9 85mm. Well, I don't know exactly which generations they use because each of these lenses has quite a few. I was told by the Iron Glass Company that Helios 40 85mm was also used in some scenes, but this lens is bigger, heavier, and costs more money than the others. So after doing some research, I purchased these three lenses in silver color because it's the earliest generation considered to have better optics and build quality. Each of these lenses can be purchased for around $200, so they are very affordable. And so far I received Mir 1 37mm and Helios 44 58mm. Still waiting for Jupiter 9 to arrive soon. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see the video about these amazing vintage lenses that made Dune Part 2 even more beautiful. Are the vintage lenses worth it? In my opinion, absolutely. There is so much value in the old glass. It has this charm, unique characters and colors. They are not the most reliable, might have issues and even break down, but because most of them are affordable, you can easily replace them or even buy multiple copies of the same lens. Yes, it takes time to research and find vintage lenses in good working condition, but if you do, it will be so rewarding. And the fact that vintage lenses are being rehoused and used to make movies, TV shows, and music videos means something. There is a huge selection of vintage lenses you can try and experiment with. I personally would love to try Leica Rs. They are a bit expensive, but hopefully in the future. So get yourself some vintage lenses and make some cool stuff. I hope this video was useful, so make sure to press like, leave a comment, and of course subscribe to the channel. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you next time. Bye.